In this video, you will learn how to multiply complex numbers. Let's first remember that a complex number is in the form a plus bi. So all of our answers will be complex numbers and they need to be in the form of a plus bi. You'll need to know about imaginary numbers. You should have learned that the square root of a -1 equals an imaginary number. So because of that, -1 equals I squared. We'll use this in our work. Let's see how this works out first before we start. So square root of -1 equals I. If we square both sides, squaring and square root cancel one another. So this squared and square root cancel, leaving us with -1 equals I squared. So we'll need that in order to work out our problems. Let's see our first one here. We have 4 plus 9i, and we're going to multiply that with 6 minus 2i. So let's first set up the distributive property. We're going to distribute the 4 to both of the terms in the second parentheses. So write 4 times 6 minus 2i. And then we're going to multiply the 9i times both terms in the second parentheses. So positive 9i times the 6 minus 2i. And now you'll distribute. 4 times 6 is 24. 4 times -2i is -8i. 9i times 6 is positive 54i. And 9i times -2i, let's do positive times negative is a negative. 9 times 2 is 18. And then I times I, just like with the variable x, you will square that because I to the first, you add those exponents, it makes it I squared. So 9i times -2i is -18i squared. So let's deal with this I squared. Like we've already mentioned, I squared equals -1. So let's replace that I squared with a -1, rewriting the rest of our problem as it is. So here we have -18 times -1. So negative times negative is going to make that a positive. So again, rewriting the problem as it is and making that plus 18. So now let's combine our like terms. Because a complex number is in the form a plus bi, let's combine our constant terms first. 24 plus 18 gives us 42. And then -8i plus 5 plus 54i gives us 46i. When you combine like terms, your answer is that like term. So it does not become I squared. When you combine an I term with an I term, it's still an I term. Let's look at our next example. Here we have -3 plus 12i. We're going to multiply that with 7 plus 4i. So again, distribute the first term to each of the terms in the second parentheses. So -3 times the 7 plus 4i. And do the second term times each of the terms in the second parentheses. So the 12i times the 7 plus 4i. Rewriting that so you can use the distributive property. So -3 times 7 is -21. -3 times 4i is -12i. 12i times 7 gives us 84i. And 12i times 4i. So again, positive times positive gives us a positive. 12 times 4 is 48. And then I times I is I squared. We know that I squared equals -1. So we're going to replace that with a -1, rewriting the rest of the problem as it is. Let's go ahead and multiply 48 times negative 1. So we have, again, rewriting the problem, a positive 48 times negative 1 gives us a negative 48. Because our answer needs to be in the form of a plus bi, let's combine our constant terms first. So negative 21 minus 48 will give us a negative 69. And then we're going to combine our imaginary terms. So negative 12i plus 84i gives us a positive 72i. Let's look at example 3. We have 6 minus 5i. We're going to multiply that with 3 minus 10i. If you feel like you're getting the hang of this, feel free to pause the video and come back and check your work. Let's go ahead and set this up. 6 times each of the terms in the second parentheses, so 6 times the 3 minus 10i. And then the negative 5. Don't forget the sign here. Negative 5 times each of the terms in the second parentheses. So negative 5i times 3 minus 10i. Now let's distribute. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times negative 10i is negative 60i. Negative 5i times 3 is negative 15i. And negative 5i times negative 10i, we have negative times negative, which gives us a positive. 5 times 10 is 50, and I times I is I squared. Just take it a piece at a time when you have several things to multiply. Multiply your signs, multiply your coefficients, and then multiply the imaginaries. Here we know that I squared needs to be replaced with negative 1. So if you want to just do it here at this step, I would encourage you to actually mark it out and write your negative 1. Because if you don't mark it out and you just show the negative 1, you're not really replacing it. So be sure to mark it out, and that way you don't replace it more than once and cause you to miss the problem. So we have 50 times negative 1. This will only require us to rewrite the problem one time rather than several times if you choose to do it this way. 50 times negative 1 is negative 50. So now we're ready to combine our like terms. 18 minus 50 gives us a negative 32, and then negative 60i and negative 15i gives us a negative 75i. When you combine like terms, your answer is that like term. So when you combine I terms, your answer is an I term, not I squared, not anything else, just an I. And let's look at our final example, number 4. We have 9 minus I. We're going to multiply that with negative 6 plus 2i. So set this up so you can distribute 9 times both of the terms. So 9 times the negative 6 plus 2i, as well as the negative I times both of the terms. So 9 times negative 6 gives us negative 54. 9 times 2i gives us a positive 18i. Negative I times negative 6 gives us a positive 6i. And negative I times 2i gives us a negative 2i squared. Negative times positive is a negative. This is a 1, so you can think about 1 times 2 is 2, and then I times I is I squared. So replace your I squared, marking that out with a negative 1. I squared equals negative 1. So now we have a negative times a negative, which is going to make that positive. So rewriting the rest of the problem and only changing this last term, negative times negative, gives us a positive 2. Combine your like terms, we get negative 54 plus 2 gives us a negative 52. And then 18i plus 6 gives us a 24i.